I'm Frank Delaney, 64 years old, and I've spent nearly 3 decades of my life with Crestwood Technologies, a tech company in the suburbs of Philadelphia. 29 years, waking up at 5 a.m., fixing anything that broke, training every new employee who walked through that door. I never took a sick day, never complained about working weekends, and never said no when they needed me to stay late to keep the servers running. 4 days, yes, 4 days was all I had left to qualify for my full pension, to walk out of there with my head held high and my future secure. But then, in a cold conference room, my boss, Brandon Chase, stared at his laptop screen and said, "We're restructuring, Frank. Budget cuts. Nothing personal, just business." I felt the ground drop out from under me. But this story doesn't end there. Stick with me because what happened next didn't just change my life, it might be a lesson for anyone watching this video. Imagine dedicating your life to a place, believing your loyalty would pay off. You show up early, stay late, fix everything from leaky pipes to server systems. You teach new hires how to do their jobs. You stay through freezing winters to make sure the heat doesn't fail. That was me at Crestwood. I started there in 1995, fresh off a divorce, having lost half of everything I owned. The facilities manager job wasn't glamorous. I was the guy unclogging drains, making sure the AC hummed through summer, but it was steady with good insurance, and they promised that if I stayed, I'd be taken care of in my old age. Crestwood was a small company back then, about 50 employees, 2 buildings still finding its way in the tech industry. I watched them grow, helped them expand to 4 buildings across the industrial park. When they needed someone to oversee the construction of a new data center, they called me. When city inspectors came asking about building codes, I was the one who faced them. I trained every facilities employee who came after me, teaching them how to read blueprints, negotiate with contractors, keep everything running without breaking the budget. Most of them left for better jobs. I stayed. This was my place. But then Brandon Chase showed up. 3 years ago, he became the new boss, young with a business degree from some fancy school and a cold way of looking at everything, like it was all just a problem to solve, including people like me who'd been there before he was born. He started bringing in consultants to optimize operational efficiency, talking about right-sizing the workforce. I saw the signs, though I didn't want to believe them at the time. Brandon stopped saying hello in the hallways, left me out of monthly meetings. When I submitted budget requests, they came back with questions I'd never gotten before. Why do we need so many maintenance contracts? Can we reduce safety inspection frequency? Am I getting too old to climb ladders and crawl through equipment rooms? I thought he was just trying to make his mark like other managers had. They come in, make noise, then settle in. But there were attending conversations that went quiet when I entered a room meetings. I wasn't invited to. A new facilities hire, asking me about my job duties, things he didn't need to know unless someone was planning to replace me. I should have paid more attention, but I was 4 days from the finish line, focused on crossing it. That day came November 8th, 2024. I was called into the conference room. Brandon sat there, eyes glued to his laptop, talking about budget cuts, how the company needed to be leaner. He didn't even look at me when he said I was being let go. There was just a manila folder on the table containing termination papers, final pay calculations, COBRA insurance info, a request to return company property. I signed where they told me to, using the Crestwood pen with a faded logo I'd carried for 5 years. Badge and keys, Brandon said, holding out his hand. I unclipped my badge from my belt, where it had sat for nearly 3 decades. The employee photo on it looked younger from when my hair was still brown, and I thought I'd retire from this place with respect. The key ring felt heavier than I expected. Master keys for every door in the building, equipment room, supply closets, loading docks. I'd been trusted with it all. I placed them in Brandon's hand without a word, took my copy of the paperwork, and walked out past cubicles where people avoided my eyes, past the break room where I'd eaten lunch at the same table for 29 years, past the security desk where I'd checked in thousands of times. The parking lot was quiet. My truck started on the first try like always. I sat there for a while, engine running, looking at the building. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't place it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, paperwork spread out in front of me. The numbers didn't add up. By my count, I had 29 years and 11 months of service. Their paperwork said 29 years and 10 months, just 1 month shy of qualifying for my full pension. I dug out an old employee handbook from 15 years ago when they changed the retirement policy. It was clear as day: 30 years of service or age 60, whichever came first for full benefits. I was 64 with 29 years and 11 months, 4 days from hitting 30 years. Then I remembered a company-wide memo Brandon sent last month. I kept a copy because it felt important. The memo talked about updating the employee handbook, clarifying retirement benefits, ensuring the company honored existing agreements. I found it in my filing cabinet, right where I left it. It stated clearly, effective immediately, all retirement benefit calculations will be based on continuous years of service as defined in the current employee handbook. Employees nearing retirement eligibility should verify their service records for accuracy. I read it 3 times, then grabbed my calculator and checked every pay stub, overtime, holiday shifts, vacation days, all documented. It all added up to 29 years and 11 months as of this Friday. They'd miscalculated, or maybe they hoped I wouldn't notice. I thought about calling Brandon, demanding they fix the paperwork, but what was the point? He'd made it clear I was done. Calling him would just give him a chance to spin another excuse, another reason why the rules didn't apply to me. I thought about hiring a lawyer, but lawyers cost money, and I didn't have much. Taking on a big company like Crestwood was a young man's game. Then I remembered Janice O'Connell. She worked in Crestwood's HR department 12 years ago, before retiring. A sharp woman, always by the book, never let the company shortchange employees' benefits. I heard she now consults, helping companies avoid legal trouble from mistreating workers. I found her number in an old address book and stared at it. Making that call meant admitting I'd been screwed. It meant fighting, not accepting, and moving on. But as I sat there looking at 29 years of pay stubs and a termination letter that didn't match the truth, something shifted. I wasn't angry. I was focused. I picked up the phone and dialed. Janice answered on the second ring. Her voice, just as I remembered, direct, no nonsense. "Frank Delaney," she said, before I could introduce myself. I heard what happened. News travels fast in this industry. I told her everything: the timing of the firing, the discrepancy in service time, Brandon's behavior over the past few months. She listened without interrupting, asking pointed questions about dates and documents. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. You kept all your pay stubs, she asked. Everything. Memos, policy, updates, anything important. My wife always told me to keep good records. Smart woman Frank. Listen to me. What Brandon did isn't just wrong, it's illegal. Federal law protects employees from being fired to deny them earned benefits. But to prove it, we need more than just timing. We need to show intent. Janice explained how cases like this work. The Department of Labor takes them seriously, but they need hard evidence, documents, patterns of behavior, something showing the firing wasn't just a coincidence, but deliberate fraud. She told me to bring everything to her office on Monday, not to talk to anyone at Crestwood, not to post anything on social media, not even to tell my neighbors. If this goes the way I think it will, we want them to think they got away with it, she said. On Monday, I drove to Janice's office with 3 boxes of paperwork, pay stubs, employee handbooks, memos, performance reviews, email printouts, 29 years of documents organized chronologically. Janice reviewed everything methodically, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When she read Brandon's memo from last month, she paused and read it again. This is gold, she said. He wrote that service time calculations must be accurate, then fired you with a wrong calculation 4 days before you hit 30 years. Either he's incompetent or he's lying. What's the difference? I asked. Incompetent, you get your job back. Lying, you get your job back, plus damages, plus a federal investigation that could shut down their entire HR department. She laid out the process. File a complaint with the Department of Labor. They'd investigate interview witnesses, review documents. If they found evidence of intentional benefit denial, Crestwood would face heavy consequences, not just fines, but potential criminal charges. How long will it take? I asked. Depends. Could be weeks, could be months. But Frank, you need to understand something. Once we file, there's no going back. Brandon will know you didn't just walk away quietly. He'll push back. She was right. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Brandon. Frank, I hear you've been talking to people about your termination. I hope you're not planning to do anything stupid. I didn't say anything. Look, I get that you're upset, but we followed company policy to the letter. Your records show 29 years and 10 months. I have the documentation right here. He said I was hired on January 15th, 1996, and terminated on November 8th, 2024. Simple math. Frank, I knew he was lying. I started at Crestwood on December 15th, 1995. I had the offer letter to prove it, but Brandon was building a defense, trying to get me to argue over the phone where he controlled the conversation. I don't want trouble, I said. Good. Because if someone files a baseless complaint, we'll have to defend ourselves. And defending ourselves might include reviewing that person's work history closely, making sure they didn't violate company policy, didn't take anything that wasn't theirs, didn't say anything to harm the company's reputation. The threat was clear fight, and they'd destroy what little reputation I had left. I understand, I said, and hung up. But I didn't really understand, because what Brandon didn't know was that Janice had filed the complaint that morning. Wednesday night, Janice called with news that changed everything. The Department of Labor is moving fast, she said. They've had Crestwood on their radar for a while. You're not the first person this has happened to. She told the investigator handling my case that over the past 2 years, 3 other long-term Crestwood employees were fired months before qualifying for full pensions, all over 60, all with service records miscalculated in oddly similar ways. They called it a systematic pattern of benefit denial, the kind of behavior that puts a company on a federal watch list. But there was more. The investigator requested personnel records for all 4 fired employees. They found a series of emails between Brandon and the new HR director discussing how to optimize the workforce and reduce long term benefit obligations. They weren't even smart about it, Janice said, using company email naming specific employees. Your name came up 6 times in the last 3 months. I felt a chill. What did they say about me? That you were a legacy cost, that your pension and health care were a major financial burden, that your position could be eliminated and duties reassigned to existing staff. They'd been planning this for months while I was showing up early, staying late training new hires and fixing their problems. There was one more thing Janice said. The investigator wanted to interview me Thursday morning, and they were bringing someone from the criminal division, Criminal Frank. When a company deliberately fires employees to avoid paying benefits, it's not just a civil issue. It's fraud. Wire fraud if they used electronic communications to plan it. Thursday morning, I sat in a conference room at the Department of Labor's downtown office. 2 investigators, younger than my son, wearing suits more expensive than my entire wardrobe, recorded everything. They asked me to walk through my work history year by year, showed me email printouts I'd never seen. Those emails were worse than Janice described. Brandon and the HR director weren't just talking about firing me, they were talking about firing anyone close to pension eligibility. They called it proactive workforce management. They had a spreadsheet with names, dates, and projected savings. Mr. Delaney, one investigator said, based on what we're seeing, we believe Crestwood Technologies engaged in a deliberate scheme to defraud multiple employees of their earned benefits. Your case is just the latest example. They showed me documents I'd never seen, internal letters about the cost of maintaining older employees' memos, about renegotiating pension obligations, a presentation to the board with a slide titled Legacy Employee Transition Strategy. My name was on that slide, along with the 3 other fired employees. We were listed under Q4 optimization targets. We need you to testify, the other investigator said. This is going to federal court. The people responsible will be held accountable. I thought about Brandon, sitting in that conference room, telling me it was just business, nothing personal. I thought about 29 years of waking up before dawn, fixing broken things, believing loyalty meant something. What do you need me to do? The federal investigation moved faster than I expected. By the following Monday, they'd seized Crestwood's email servers and interviewed 6 current employees. By Wednesday, they executed a search warrant on Brandon's office and the HR department. Janice kept me updated. They found more evidence than they knew what to do with internal documents from 3 years back, showing a systematic plan to phase out older employees' spreadsheets, calculating pension savings, emails discussing the best timing for firings to avoid legal challenges. They documented everything Janice said over coffee Thursday morning. It's like they wanted to get caught. Their plan was simple but brutal. Identify employees nearing pension eligibility, find reasons to question their performance, or necessity, fire them just before benefits kicked in, saving millions in long-term costs. Brandon pitched it to the board as financially necessary. The company was growing, but pension obligations were eating into profits. Younger employees had lower insurance costs and no long-term benefit commitments. He didn't count on someone like me keeping meticulous records or someone like Janice knowing federal labor law or investigators taking benefit fraud seriously. Friday afternoon, Brandon called again. This time his voice was different, higher, nervous. Frank, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your termination. We should work this out. What misunderstanding? Your service record? We might have miscalculated. If you come in Monday, we can review it. Make sure you get what you deserve. He was panicking. The investigation was now public, mentioned in the business section of the paper. Crestwood's stock price dropped 15% in 2 days. The board was asking questions Brandon couldn't answer. No need, I said. Frank, please. We've worked together for years. Let's handle this professionally. No lawyers, no government agencies, just two reasonable guys talking. But it was too late. The Department of Labor had filed criminal charges, not just civil ones. Brandon was facing 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud employee benefits. Monday morning, the company's lawyer called. Not Brandon, but a real lawyer. The kind they call when things get serious. Mr. Delaney, my client is interested in discussing a settlement. Full restoration of your pension benefits, healthcare, and additional compensation for the inconvenience. How much compensation? We're prepared to offer $50,000 provided you agree not to pursue further legal action. I said I'd think about it, then called Janice. Don't take it, she said immediately. Frank, they're scared. The criminal charges are just the start. When this hits federal court, other employees will come forward. This'll be a multi-million-dollar class action suit. She was right. By Tuesday, the Department of Labor was contacted by 8 current and former Crestwood employees, suspecting their terminations or benefit calculations were fraudulent. By Thursday, the number was 15. The local news ran a story. Federal investigation targets local tech company. Brandon's photo appeared in the business section, looking uncomfortable in a suit that now seemed too big for him. I didn't have to do anything but wait. The system was working the way it was supposed to. Tuesday morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the paper when Janice called earlier than usual. Turn on channel 6. Now, I grabbed the remote and switched it on. Brandon Chase was being led out of Crestwood's building. Hands cuffed federal agents, carrying boxes of documents behind him. The anchor talked about charges of wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud employee benefits. The federal prosecutor accused Brandon and HR Director Patricia Walsh of orchestrating a systematic scheme to fire long-term employees just before they qualified for full pensions. The camera showed Brandon stumbling slightly as agents led him to a federal car. He looked smaller than I remembered. The indictment charged Brandon with 14 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy facing up to 70 years in prison. I turned off the TV and sat in silence. 29 years of waking up before dawn, fixing things, believing loyalty mattered. It did matter, just not the way I thought. Janice called back an hour later with more news. The Department of Labor had completed its investigation. 18 employees were affected by the scheme with total damages exceeding $2 million. Crestwood's board fired Brandon and Patricia, immediately agreeing to fully compensate all affected employees. Your pension is fully restored, Janice said, backdated to when it should have kicked in, plus healthcare and damages. How much damages? $200,000 plus legal fees. I thought about Brandon telling me It was just business, not personal, just how things worked. 3 months later, I was in my workshop building a bookshelf for my daughter, the feel of tools in my hands, the smell of sawdust, the sound of wood taking shape. It reminded me why I was always good at fixing things. The pension checks came on time. The $200,000 sat in a savings account earning interest. I hadn't touched, it wasn't sure I needed to. After 29 years of steady work, I had everything I needed. Brandon pleaded guilty, sentenced to 18 months in prison. Patricia got 6 months and 2 years probation. Crestwood was acquired by a larger company, which cleaned out the management team. The local paper ran a follow-up story. Local man's complaint sparks federal investigation. They wanted to interview me, but I declined. I wasn't looking for attention. I just wanted what I'd earned. My daughter called while I was sanding the bookshelf. She'd seen the news online and wanted to make sure I was okay. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said, "for standing up for yourself." "I didn't do anything special," I said. "Just made a phone call." "Sometimes that's enough," she replied. I finished the bookshelf that afternoon. Solid oak dovetail joints, the kind that'll last decades. I loaded it onto my truck and drove to my daughter's house. She'd wanted a bookshelf for a while, and now I had the time to do it right. Driving there, I thought about the difference between fixing something and building something new. Both have value, but building feels better. But the story didn't stop there. The class action lawsuit grew. By spring 2020, 22 employees had joined seeking $3.5 million in damages. I became a key witness, not just for myself, but for all of them, people who'd trusted Crestwood like I had. Every time I went to court, I remembered the long days, the late nights, the times I put the company before my family. I remembered my wife, who always told me to keep records, who'd be proud I didn't give up. Once during a court break, a former employee, Tom, approached me. He'd been a server technician, fired 3 months before his pension kicked in. "Frank," he said, "if you hadn't spoken up, none of us would have dared." I didn't know what to say, just nodded. But that moment made me realize this fight wasn't just about me. It was for everyone who'd believed in a company's promises. I want to share another story. So you see, this doesn't just happen to me. In Ohio, a factory worker named Maria, 62, was fired 6 weeks before her pension kicked in. Like me, she kept every pay stub, every performance review. She contacted a labor lawyer who found the company deliberately misclassified her service time. Maria filed a complaint with the Department of Labor, and within months, she not only got her pension back, but also $75,000 in damages. Maria told the press it wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming her dignity. Her story, like mine, shows that standing up isn't just a personal win. It sets a precedent for others to fight back. Think about this in the US. Thousands of people face what I went through every year. According to the Department of Labor, in 2020, they handled over 200,000 complaints about benefit violations, recovering $1.7 billion for workers. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Many don't know their rights or fear losing their jobs if they speak up. I was like that. I thought accepting and moving on was the only way. But sitting with those papers, realizing Crestwood deliberately cheated me, I knew I couldn't stay silent. Neither should you. If you're in a job where your boss starts asking odd questions about your role, or you're suddenly left out of meetings, start documenting. Every email, every memo, every conversation, they're your weapons. And if the worst happens, don't think you have to fight alone. There are labor lawyers, HR consultants like Janice, and the Department of Labor ready to help. I remember another story about James, a 59-year-old engineer in Texas. His company restructured, and he was fired 2 months before his stock options vested. James kept emails where his boss hinted at streamlining senior staff. He hired a lawyer who uncovered a pattern of age-based firings. The company settled for $1.2 million split between James and 6 colleagues. James used his share to start a consulting firm, proving it's never too late to start over. His story reminds me that winning isn't just about getting back what you lost. It's about opening a new chapter. As the class action lawsuit progressed, I started getting letters from former Crestwood employees I hadn't spoken to in years. One Susan, who worked in accounting, wrote that she was fired 5 years ago, just before qualifying for lifetime health care. She thought it was bad luck, but reading about my case in the paper, she realized she might have been a victim too. She joined the lawsuit, and last week she called to thank me. "Frank, you gave me hope," she said. "I thought I'd lost everything, but now I have a chance to get what I deserve." Letters like Susan's showed me the ripple effect of speaking up. It didn't just change my life, it changed lives of people I didn't even know. Now, sitting in my workshop, I think about this journey. I think about the sleepless nights, wondering if I was doing the right thing. I think about Brandon, who said it's just business, now in prison, learning that business has consequences. I think about my wife, who taught me the value of keeping records, and my daughter, who says she's proud. But most of all, I think about you, the person watching this video. Maybe you're in a job that makes you feel undervalued. Maybe you're worried about your future, wondering if your loyalty will pay off. I'm here to tell you, you have the power to change your story. You're not just a number on a spreadsheet. You're the hours you put in the problems you solve, the life you build. If a company betrays that you have the right to take back what's yours, I'm still building bookshelves, fixing things, doing what makes me feel alive. The settlement money's in the bank, but I don't need it to be happy. I have my daughter, my home memories of a life of hard work, and I have this lesson sometimes. One phone call, one moment of refusing to stay silent changes everything. So if you're hesitating, wondering if it's worth fighting, let me tell you it is. Not just for the money, not just for the benefits, but because you deserve respect. Make that call. Send that email. Find your Janice, someone who'll help you stand up. And keep going, because your story, like mine, is worth telling. I'm not done yet. The class action lawsuit is set to run through the end of the year, and I'll be there testifying for those who can't speak for themselves. Every day I read the news, hear about other companies being investigated for similar tricks. It reminds me that my story isn't unique, but it's part of something bigger, a movement to hold companies accountable. If you're watching and thinking, this could happen to me, prepare yourself. Keep records, know your rights, and if that day comes, remember Frank Delaney, an ordinary guy who thought he was just an employee, but learned he could change the game. I look at the bookshelves in my workshop, the smooth lines of oak, and think about the journey that brought me here. But my story doesn't end with restoring my pension or seeing Brandon led away in handcuffs. No, it goes further, becoming a storm that neither Crestwood nor I could have predicted. What happened next is a chain of events that made me realize one small act, like calling Janice, can create ripples strong enough to topple a corporate empire. And if you think my story's been dramatic so far, wait until you hear what happens when more truth comes to light, when Crestwood's darker secrets are exposed, and when I learn that my fight wasn't just for me, but for dozens of others I'd never met. After finishing the bookshelf, I spent more time in my workshop, but my mind was still spinning with the class action lawsuit. Janice called me one Wednesday morning, her voice more urgent than usual. Frank, you need to come to my office now. There's something you have to see. I drove through Philadelphia's suburban streets, past familiar neighborhoods where I used to take my daughter to school, past coffee shops where my wife and I spent weekends. When I got to Janice's office, she didn't greet me as usual. Instead, she slid a thick stack of documents across her desk. These are emails from Crestwood's servers, she said. The federal investigators sent them this morning. And Frank, they're not just about you or the 18 others. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. These emails weren't just between Brandon and Patricia. They included senior executives, people I'd only seen at company-wide meetings, wearing suits more expensive than my truck. One email from the VP of Finance to Brandon was titled Long-Term Optimization Plan. Its contents chilled me. We need to reduce legacy personnel costs by 40% over the next 5 years. Starting with those nearing pension thresholds is the most efficient way. Ensure records are clean to avoid litigation. Another email. Brandon's reply read, Delaney's the easiest target. Nearly 30 years no longer fits the lean model. We'll handle before Q. My blood rushed to my face. They didn't just target me. They'd planned this for years, targeting anyone who'd been there long enough to become a legacy cost. But the real shock was a chain of emails between Brandon and an outside consulting firm, a name I'd never heard. Pinnacle Solutions. They were hired to modernize Crestwood's workforce, but in reality, they were specialists in removing older employees without leaving legal traces. An email from Pinnacle to Brandon listed risk mitigation strategies, fire employees in small restructuring waves, alter service records by adjusting start dates, and create pressure to make employees quit voluntarily before being fired. They even suggested hiring younger staff at lower salaries to enhance competitiveness. Reading those words, I felt like I wasn't human to them, just a number, an obstacle to bigger profits. Frank, Janice said, her voice shaking with anger. This isn't just an internal scheme. Pinnacle works with dozens of companies like Crestwood across the country. If we bring this to light, it could change the entire tech industry. I sat there trying to process it all. Crestwood wasn't acting alone. They were part of a larger system, a machine designed to exploit people like me, who'd given their lives to their jobs. But then Janice dropped another bombshell. There's a witness, she said, a former Pinnacle employee who left because she couldn't stomach how they treated workers. She contacted the federal investigators, willing to testify. And Frank, she has documents, not just from Crestwood, but from 6 other companies, Pinnacle advised, all using similar tactics. I could hardly believe it. This wasn't just my story anymore, or the 22 employees in the class action suit. This was a scandal that could shake the industry, exposing how major companies abused older workers to boost stock prices. That witness, Emily Carter, was a 28-year-old analyst at Pinnacle. She'd seen enough to make her conscience rebel. In a meeting with Janice and the federal investigators, Emily explained that Pinnacle had an internal playbook instructing companies on how to fire employees without openly breaking laws. They called people like me obsolete personnel. encouraging firms to create hostile work environments to force us out. Emily brought a USB drive with hundreds of documents, contracts, emails, memos, proving Pinnacle helped Crestwood and others save billions by denying pensions and insurance. I couldn't keep working there, Emily said, her eyes red. Every time I saw a name on a spreadsheet, I thought of my dad, who was fired before his pension, too. I had to do the right thing. Hearing her, I felt a strange connection. Emily was younger than my daughter, but she understood the pain of being betrayed by a company, and like me, she chose not to stay silent. But then came another twist. Among Emily's documents was an email from Brandon to Crestwood's CEO proposing a contingency plan if my firing was investigated. He suggested fabricating a record accusing me of violating company policy, specifically stealing company property by taking home old maintenance tools. He wrote Delaney has no evidence to counter. An accusation like this will discredit any complaint he files. Reading that email, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I'd never taken anything from Crestwood. The tools I used at home were mine, bought with my own money. But Brandon was willing to lie to ruin me just to protect himself. He thought you wouldn't fight back, Janice said. He was wrong. The class action lawsuit was no longer just a legal battle. It became a media phenomenon. National outlets like CNN and MSNBC started covering it with headlines like Tech Scandal Major Firms Accused of Defrauding Employees of Benefits. A reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer contacted me for an interview. I declined, but agreed to meet a group of former Crestwood employees at a local coffee shop. There I met Linda, who'd worked in marketing, fired 5 years ago. She said after her termination, she had to sell her house because she couldn't afford medical bills. I thought it was my fault, Linda said, her voice breaking. But reading about you, Frank, I realized they planned it from the start. Linda joined the lawsuit, and her story was featured in a long-form article sparking public outrage. Social media posts from X to Reddit exploded with the #justice for Frank, and thousands shared their own stories of corporate mistreatment. I don't use social media much, but my daughter showed me the posts. One read, "My dad lost his pension to a company like Crestwood. Frank Delaney is the hero we need." Reading that, I felt both proud and pressured. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted justice. But now, I was fighting for more people than I'd ever imagined. And then another shock. One morning, I received an anonymous letter at my house. No return address, just a folded sheet of paper with handwritten words. Check Brandon Chase's offshore accounts. He didn't do this for the company. I took the letter to Janice immediately. She frowned, but wasn't surprised. I suspected Brandon had personal motives, she said. He was too reckless to just be doing it for company profit. Janice passed the letter to the federal investigators, and within a week, they uncovered a bank account in the Cayman Islands under Brandon's name, holding $1.2 million. Transactions showed he received consulting fees from Pinnacle Solutions, a secret commission, for executing the firing scheme. Brandon wasn't just defrauding employees, he was profiting personally from our pain. The news broke in the press with headlines like tech exec accused of embezzlement in pension scandal. Crestwood, already reeling, faced a reputation crisis it couldn't recover from. Its stock price dropped another third, and major shareholders started pulling out. But what truly stunned me was when I was invited to testify at a congressional hearing. A senator from Pennsylvania who'd read about my case, was leading a committee investigating labor abuses in the tech industry. They wanted me to share my story, to push for a new bill, strengthening protections for older workers. I'm not a public speaker. I'm more comfortable fixing pipes than addressing politicians. But sitting in that hearing room in Washington, D.C., facing senators and cameras, I realized this was a chance to ensure no one else went through what I had. I told them about my 29 years, about Brandon, about Pinnacle, about the emails calling me a legacy cost. When I finished, a senator asked Mr. Delaney if you could say something to the companies doing this. What would it be? I took a deep breath and said, "You might think we're just numbers, but we're the people who built your companies, and we won't let you take what we earned without a fight." The room applauded, and in that moment, I felt like my voice was finally heard. After the hearing, the bill called the Employee Benefits Protection Act passed with bipartisan support. It increased penalties for companies that intentionally deny benefits and required independent audits for pension programs. Labor advocacy groups called it the Frank Delaney Law, though I told them not to. I didn't do this for fame, but I couldn't deny the pride I felt seeing my name tied to something bigger. The Crestwood class action lawsuit settled in fall 2025, with the company agreeing to pay $5 million to 25 employees, including me. But more meaningful was that Pinnacle Solutions faced a federal investigation leading to its shutdown. Emily Carter, the young whistleblower, was offered a job at a nonprofit fighting for labor rights and sent me a thank you card writing, "Thank you, Frank, for showing me what courage looks like." Now, in my workshop, I don't just build bookshelves. I teach a small class at the local community center, showing retirees how to protect their benefits. I tell my story, not to brag, but to remind them they have power. I get emails from across the country from people saying my story inspired them to stand up. A man in Michigan who got his pension back, a woman in Arizona who won a lawsuit against her old company. Each letter reminds me that my fight was never just about me. It was about all of us ordinary workers who built this country, who deserve respect. And Brandon, he got out of prison after 18 months, but no one would hire him. I heard he moved to a small town in Idaho, opened a coffee shop, but it closed after 6 months. Part of me feels sorry for him, not because he deserves it, but because he had a chance to do the right thing and chose wrong. But then I remember the emails, the lies, the offshore account, and I realize he's not worth my thoughts anymore. I have my daughter, my class's letters from strangers thanking me. I have a life, and it's better than anything Crestwood could have taken. If you're watching this video, I want you to pause and think, what would you do if this happened to you? Would you stay silent, or would you fight? I'm not special. I'm just a guy who fixed pipes, kept pay stubs, and made a phone call. But that call changed everything. It can change everything for you too. So keep watching, keep learning, and remember, you're never alone in this fight. I'm still here building bookshelves, teaching classes, and waiting for the next story that needs to be told. And I know out there somewhere, you've got a story too, one worth fighting for. When I thought my story had reached its peak with the congressional hearing and the law bearing my name, a new wave of truth and drama hit, pulling me into a whirlwind more intense than ever. I, Frank Delaney, was just an ordinary man who thought he'd end his career quietly after 29 years at Crestwood Technologies. But what happened next didn't just shake my old company, it got the whole country's attention, thrusting me into a bigger fight, not just for justice, but for changing how America sees the value of workers like me. If you thought my story was thrilling so far, hold on tight, because the secrets uncovered next will keep you glued to the screen. Winter 2025, as snow started falling in Philadelphia, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The caller introduced himself as Mark Thompson, an investigative reporter from the New York Times. "Mr. Delaney," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement, "I'm working on a story about tech companies and their labor abuse tactics. Your case is at the center, but I've uncovered something that could blow this wide open. I need to meet you." I hesitated. I'd turned down most interviews not wanting to be in the spotlight, but something in Mark's tone made me agree. We met at a small diner downtown, where the smell of toasted bread and coffee mingled. Mark set a laptop on the table and opened a file. "These are internal documents from Pinnacle Solutions," he said, "not just from the Crestwood case, but from a network of major tech companies, Silicon Valley and beyond. And Frank, your name is in a very specific document." My heart raced. The document was an Pinnacle report titled "Reputation Risks from High-Profile Cases." It listed me, Frank Delaney, as a high-threat individual for sparking the class action lawsuit and drawing media attention. The report suggested ways to neutralize me, including spreading rumors that I'd embezzled funds from Crestwood and hiring PR firms to push a narrative that I was a disgruntled employee exaggerating the truth for personal revenge. "They plan to smear you," Mark said, "but they didn't count on you having evidence and public support." I was stunned. The idea that a company, no, a network of companies, would go so far to destroy the reputation of someone like me just to protect their profits made me both angry and more determined. Mark revealed he had an inside source, a former Pinnacle executive who left after disagreeing with their tactics. This source, anonymous for fear of retaliation, gave Mark a massive trove of documents showing Pinnacle didn't just work with Crestwood, but with over 30 major tech firms across the U.S., from startups in Austin to giants in Seattle. They'd designed systematic firing programs targeting older employees, pregnant women, even veterans, anyone with long-term benefits that could cut into profits. "This isn't just a corporate scandal," Mark said. "It's a moral crisis for the tech industry. And you, Frank, accidentally lit the fuse." But then a twist that nearly knocked me out of my chair. Mark showed me a video sent anonymously through a burner email account. It was a secretly recorded clip from an internal Pinnacle meeting filmed on a hidden phone. In the video, a Pinnacle executive, a middle-aged man, in a gray suit, was presenting to a group of senior managers, including Brandon Chase. The man said, "We need companies like Crestwood to understand that removing obsolete personnel is an art. Do it right, you save millions. Do it wrong, you get a Frank Delaney, an ordinary worker with too much documentation and too little fear." The room laughed, as if my story was a joke. Brandon, sitting in the corner, smirked, nodding. But what sent chills down my spine was when the man continued, "If Delaney becomes a bigger problem, we have options. Our connections in Washington can slow federal investigations, and if needed, we can make him look like a fraud to the public." My blood boiled. They weren't just trying to steal my pension, they were ready to ruin my life to keep their secrets. Mark said he planned to publish the story in 2 weeks, but needed my help to verify details. I agreed on one condition: the story had to focus not just on me, but on others hurt by Pinnacle and similar firms. I told him about Linda, Tom, Susan, people who'd lost homes, health, and dignity because of these tactics. Mark agreed, and over the next few days I worked with him, providing documents Janice and I had collected and connecting him with other former Crestwood employees to share their stories. When the New York Times story dropped, titled The Exploitation Machine, How Tech Giants Stole Workers' Benefits, it was a bombshell. The article didn't just cover Crestwood, but named 4 other major tech firms, all tied to Pinnacle. It quoted internal documents, the secret video, and my story as a prime example of worker resilience. Within 24 hours, the article was shared millions of times on X with the hashtag #StopPinnacle trending globally. Evening news shows on NBC and CBS invited me to appear, but I declined. Instead, I suggested they interview Emily Carter, who'd bravely provided Pinnacle's documents. Emily became the face of the movement, a young woman standing up to corporate giants for her conscience. But the drama didn't stop. Right after the article, a second lawsuit was filed, this time not against Crestwood, but directly against Pinnacle Solutions. A group of lawyers in San Francisco, representing over 100 employees from various companies, accused Pinnacle of violating federal anti-fraud laws and worker protection statutes. I was called to testify in this case, and this time I faced Pinnacle's executives in court. One of them, the man from the video named Richard Grayson, stared at me from the witness stand, his eyes full of contempt. During cross-examination, our lawyer played the secret video, and the courtroom went silent as Grayson talked about neutralizing me. When asked if he regretted his actions, Grayson shrugged and said, "It's just how modern business works." The judge, an older woman with a sharp gaze, cut in. "Business doesn't mean illegal, Mr. Grayson." The courtroom buzzed, and I felt a spark of hope that justice wasn't just an empty word out. While the Pinnacle lawsuit unfolded, I received another letter, this time not anonymous. It was from a woman named Diane, living in Denver, Colorado. Diane wrote that she'd been a secretary at a tech firm in Boulder, fired 3 years ago, 6 months shy of lifetime healthcare eligibility. She'd lost the ability to pay medical bills and had to move in with her son. "I read your story in the paper," she wrote. "I thought I was the only one, but you gave me the courage to check my old records. I found an email from my boss mentioning Pinnacle Solutions. I filed a complaint with the Department of Labor, and they're investigating my old company. Thank you, Frank, for not giving up." Diane's letter included a photo, her standing outside the Department of Labor office in Denver, smiling, holding a stack of documents. I pinned that photo to the wall in my workshop next to a picture of my wife. It reminded me that every step I took wasn't just for me, but for people like Diane, who deserved a second chance. But then another twist I could hardly believe. One evening, watching the news, a breaking story flashed: former Crestwood Technologies executive arrested on money laundering charges. It was Brandon Chase. Turns out, his offshore Cayman account didn't just hold consulting fees from Pinnacle. Federal investigators found he'd used it to launder money from a network of illegal transactions involving the sale of Crestwood's customer data to foreign third parties. This arrest wasn't directly tied to my firing case, but it was a fatal blow to Crestwood's reputation. The company, already acquired, now faced a second investigation from the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. The news spread fast, and on X, people started calling Brandon the tech conman of the decade. One user wrote, "Frank Delaney didn't just take down Brandon Chase, he exposed an entire criminal network." Legend. I laughed when my daughter read me that comment. But deep down, I knew the truth was more complex. I didn't set out to be a legend. I just wanted to protect what was mine. By spring 2026, the Pinnacle lawsuit ended with a historic ruling. The company was fined $200 million and banned from operating in the U.S. Its executives, including Richard Grayson, faced individual criminal charges, with Grayson sentenced to 7 years for wire fraud and obstruction of justice. The Crestwood class action lawsuit expanded with over 40 employees receiving compensation totaling $7 million. I got an additional $50,000 for my role as a witness, but I donated it to a nonprofit helping older workers inspired by Emily Carter. I didn't need more money. My pension was steady, and my workshop was where I found joy. But the drama didn't end. One day, I got a call from a documentary filmmaker in Los Angeles wanting to make a film about my story titled The Man Against the Machine. They asked me to be a consultant and share my story on camera. I declined to appear on screen. I'm no actor, but I agreed to meet them, share documents, and introduce them to Janice and Emily. The documentary, released in 2027, became a sensation, winning an award at Sundance and streaming on Netflix. It didn't just tell my story, but those of hundreds of workers across America who stood up to abusive companies. One scene brought tears to my eyes. A woman in Detroit who worked in the auto industry said she saw my article and filed a complaint, recovering her benefits after 20 years of denial. Frank Delaney doesn't know me, she said, but he saved my life. Now, in my workshop, I think about this journey. I think about Brandon Pinnacle, the emails calling me a legacy cost. I think about Diane Linda Tom and thousands across the country who found courage because of my story. I think about my wife, who'd smile from above, and my daughter, who keeps my bookshelf in her living room, showing it off to friends. But most of all, I think about you, the person watching this video, maybe wondering if you should stand up to injustice. I'm here to tell you you should. You don't need to be a hero or a movie star. You just need to be you with a stack of documents, a phone call, and a bit of courage. I did it, and you can too. I still teach my community center class, and every week I meet new people from bank clerks to factory workers, all with their own stories, all wanting the same thing, to be treated fairly. One student, Maria, said she used settlement money from a lawsuit to open a daycare, fulfilling her mother's dream. Another, John, won a case against his old insurance company and now travels the U.S. in an RV, living the life he always wanted. Each story is a victory, a reminder that my fight made a difference. And as I sit here, sawdust on my hands and the smell of oak in the air, I know I've done something bigger than myself. I didn't just get my pension back, I helped change laws, change how we see workers' value, and inspired a generation to stand up to injustice. When I thought my story had hit the limit of drama with the Netflix documentary, The Pinnacle Lawsuit, and Brandon Chase's letter, a new, unexpected, and even more shocking series of events pulled me back into the center of a storm I never imagined. I'm Frank Delaney, who just wanted to finish 30 years at Crestwood Technologies and retire quietly. But what happened next didn't just shake the tech industry, it thrust me into a personal battle where I faced new enemies, darker secrets, and a nagging question: does justice really win when the most powerful are determined to bury the truth? If you've followed me this far, brace yourself, because this story's about to get wilder than ever, with twists that'll keep you hooked. Summer 2027, as the man against the machine was taking Netflix by storm, I started getting calls from strange numbers, not just from the press, but from people claiming to be old colleagues I didn't recall. One evening, while sanding a table in my workshop, the phone rang. The caller was a woman, her voice trembling, introducing herself as Karen Mitchell. Mr. Delaney, I worked in Crestwood's IT department in the 90s, she said. I left before you were fired, but I know something you need to hear. It's about Brandon Chase and something much bigger than the pension scheme. A jolt ran through me. Karen refused to say more over the phone, afraid of being monitored. She asked to meet in person at a small park in suburban Philadelphia where few people went. I'm not one for drama, but something in Karen's voice made me agree. I drove to the park the next morning, bringing a coffee and a sense of unease. Karen, a woman about 60, with short silver hair, was waiting on a bench, clutching a USB drive. This is everything I have, she said, handing it to me. I kept it for women and veterans. The council launched a nationwide training program called the Delaney Initiative, offering free classes for workers on recognizing and countering corporate abuse tactics. Thousands enrolled, and every month I get letters from people saying the program helped them keep their jobs, claim benefits, or simply feel empowered. One letter from a woman in Atlanta, Gloria, brought tears to my eyes, Mr. Delaney. I thought I had no voice, but after taking a Delaney Initiative class, I confronted my boss and got the raise I deserved. Thank you for showing me I'm stronger than I thought. And then, a personal moment that made me feel my journey was truly complete. One afternoon, while finishing an armchair in my workshop, my daughter arrived with a surprise. She brought a group of kid students from a local elementary school where she volunteers as a teacher. They'd read a simplified version of my story in a new children's book, Frank and the Fight for Justice. The kids wanted to meet the hero from the book, and each brought up drawing childlike images of me holding a flag, standing before a big building, or fixing a pipe with a smile. One girl about 8 named Mia gave me a special drawing me standing by a bookshelf with the words, Mr. Frank makes everything better. I hugged Mia and the whole class, trying not to cry. That moment showed me my legacy wasn't just lawsuits or laws. It was inspiring the next generation to believe they could stand up even against giants. But life isn't always high moments. I still live in my old Philadelphia house, drive the same truck that's carried me for years, drink coffee at Dunkin' Donuts every morning. I still teach at the community center, where I now have a classroom named after me, with a plaque reading dedicated to Frank Delaney, who proved one person can change the world. I still get letters from across the country, from a man in Montana who won a lawsuit against a mining company, to a woman in New Orleans who opened a flower shop with settlement money from a similar case. Each letter reminds me that justice isn't a destination, it's a journey, and I'm still on that road. As for Brandon Chase, I heard he moved to a small town in Oregon, working as a bartender in a dive bar. He never contacted me again, and I don't expect him to. The wooden box he sent from prison sits on my workshop shelf, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder that even the worst wrongdoers face consequences. Karen Mitchell now lives quietly in Canada, occasionally sending me photos of her vegetable garden. Emily Carter is the director of an international nonprofit fighting for global labor rights. David Sullivan started a small consulting firm helping companies treat employees fairly. And Sophia Chase Roberts' granddaughter is now an activist using her family's story to warn about the consequences of corporate greed. Looking back, I see my story isn't just about getting my pension or taking down Crestwood. It's about finding strength in myself, learning that one ordinary person with a phone call and a stack of documents can shake the world. It's about building a legacy not with money or fame, but with the bookshelves I make, the classes I teach, and the people I inspire. I think of Mia, the girl with the drawing, and hope that one day, when she grows up, she'll know she can make things better too. And you, watching this video, you're the final chapter of this story. You're the one who'll decide what happens next. Maybe you're in a job that makes you feel undervalued. Maybe you're holding pay stubs, emails, memos, wondering if they're worth fighting for. I'm here to tell you they are. You are. You don't need to be a lawyer, a politician, or a hero. You just need to be you with a bit of courage and a refusal to quit. I did it from a pipe fixer to a man in the White House, from a fired employee to someone who changed the rules. And you can too. Grab your documents, make that call, find your Janice, your Sarah, your Emily to stand with you. Write your own story because it's not just about you, it's about all of us, the ordinary workers who built this country, who deserve respect. I, Frank Delaney, will always be here in my workshop, sawdust on my hands, and a bookshelf waiting to be finished, ready to hear your story. So keep going, keep fighting, and let the world know you're never alone. Our story, yours and mine, never really ends because every day someone new stands up and a new chapter is written.